scientists now accept the fact that this field is there. So it's not a theory, it's not a metaphor, and it's not a New Age thought. It is a scientific fact. But what the scientists are now asking is, how do we use this field? What does it mean in our lives? And this is where we go back into the ancient traditions that have known about this field for thousands of years, and they tell us how that we can apply this in our lives. They say, yes, not only does the field exist, they say, here's how you use it in your life, and this is where the great spiritual traditions have been born. And later, religions came along and kind of wrapped themselves around these traditions. But if we can go to the heart, go to the core of those great spiritual teachings, we're given the instructions that tell us how we can communicate with this field of energy to create healing in our bodies, healing in our families, peace between nations, and cooperation in the family of humankind. And I think that is worthwhile to explore.
Yeah, definitely. And so in a way, we're kind of approaching or coming to kind of a full circle here, I guess. And with this, again, science as a tool, we are rediscovering that fact, I guess.
Well, Henrik, it's interesting that you use that language, because that is precisely the language that I use as well. I want to make myself very clear. I was trained as a scientist, and I believe that science is good, and we've benefited from science. It has served us, and it's given us things and experiences that we would never have without the science. What has happened, in my opinion, is that now we're pushing the limits of the science, and we're doing so without the spirituality that gives meaning to that science.
Yeah.
And I think that the science can become empty, if I can use that term. It loses its heart and the respect and the honoring of life until we bring back the spiritual principles that tell us that we're part of everything. Those spiritual principles tell us that we're part of all life, that we're part of one another, that life is precious. And that's something that it's hard for science to really tell us, because what science does, science tells us how things work. It tells us about the mechanism, the nuts and the bolts of why things work. But science doesn't always tell us how to apply those understandings in our lives.
The
spiritual understandings are not technical, but they tell us, because we're all connected, here is what that connection means, and here's how you use it in your life. And to me, it's not that the two are incompatible, it's that the two must be in place. The two are necessary. They require one another for us to have a complete understanding of this universe and of ourselves, our role, who are we in the world, and what are our true capabilities, what are our true responsibilities. And I think that comes from our understanding when we marry the spirituality with the science, when we marry how things work with how to use those understandings in our lives, then it brings us full circle. And we have all the information we need to make the decisions about our future. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult for people now to make many of the decisions, is because we simply don't have all the information. We're not told that we're part of the rocks and the trees and the air and the earth. Some people know that, but it's not general mainstream thinking.
That's right.
And we're not told that we have a language within each of us that communicates with this field of energy to create the effects in our lives and in our world that bring joy to our hearts. We're not told that we have the language to communicate with this field of energy. This is some of the information that was lost in the Western Judeo-Christian traditions. On the one hand. On the other hand, it was not lost in many of the ancient and indigenous traditions, and this is why I think it's valuable to go into these remote isolated villages and the pristine monasteries of Tibet and Bolivia and Peru and the mountains of Egypt, because there is a knowledge that's been preserved in their culture that was lost in our culture for a number of different reasons. We can talk about those if we choose.
Mm-hmm.
But when we bring that lost knowledge back and marry it with the science, this is where we begin to have a fresh new understanding of our universe and our world.
Mm.
All of a sudden it doesn't look like such a scary place, because it tells us that we are in direct communication with our world, and when we know this language, we can create the effects of healing and peace. But first we must learn the language, and that's the language based in our hearts, human feeling, human emotion, and the power of true belief, which is different than the things that we think or wish or hope will come true in our lives. There's a big difference there.
Mm. So there are many areas to go into here. The one, of course, the field that you mentioned, I guess that this goes right into the area of quantum physics, if I understand things correctly.
Absolutely. This the field that we're talking about, Henrik, it's such a new field that scientists have yet to agree upon one name for this field. So if you do a Google search on the internet, or you read the scientific books, some scientists simply call this the field. There's actually a book by a woman named Lynn McTaggart. It's called The Field. It's a beautiful book.
We had Lynn on the program, so yeah, definitely.
I actually do conferences, and I'll be presenting with her. I think we'll be in Hamburg in June of next year. We'll be there for a conference.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting.
But maybe I'm not supposed to say that yet. I don't know.
Okay.
But so some people simply call this the field. Stephen Hawking, the physicist, calls it the mind of God. The former Apollo astronaut, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, calls it nature's mind.
Mm.
The father of quantum theory, Max Planck, called it the matrix, and now we're calling it the divine matrix, and there are other names. They're all different names for the same field of energy. It is a quantum essence, a quantum a field of energy that works differently than typical energy that we would expect to measure with our equipment. And this is one of the reasons why it's taken so long for scientists to validate this field, is because it doesn't behave the way a radio wave would behave, or a television broadcast wave. So now that we understand how the field works, scientists are building equipment that can measure the field, and we know that it's there. But this field it's the energy that precedes everything our world is made of. So it's the energy that becomes the atoms of our physical reality. And what's so interesting is that the experiments are showing that human emotion directly communicates with this energy. So when we create the feeling in our hearts, as if, and this is the great secret that was preserved in these ancient cultures, when we can feel as if our heart's desire has already happened, when we can feel as if our prayer is already answered, when we can feel as if the healing of our loved ones has already happened, or the peace between nations is already there, these are the feelings that communicate directly with this field of energy, and the field of energy will conform to those feelings. In other words, we must feel the outcome as if it's already happened, so that this field can mirror that back to us in our reality. And this is a very different way for the Western mind to think about our world and how it works. But it's also precisely the way that many of the indigenous traditions have always believed and have always felt And now the science is beginning to help us understand why that makes sense.
That's right, and just as you say, the achievement of is going out there and get it, or making it, or building it, or whatever it might be. But as you say, this is totally different. And I mean, is this then the language that you mentioned earlier? Is this what that is?
It's a language that has no words, Henrik. It's the language of human emotion, the language of us feeling in our hearts, not just thinking in our minds. This is where many people get stuck. They say if they think positive, or if they do the affirmation, if they say, my loved ones are healed right now, if they say that enough times, that it's actually going to happen. And the thoughts are important. They are important. But the secret that was lost in the Western traditions in the 4th century A.D., 1,700 years ago, this is the information that was taken out of the biblical texts in the Judeo-Christian tradition when those books were edited in the 4th century. Mm. We know that 45 books were edited that would become our Western biblical tradition. 45 books. 20 of those books were removed completely. Another 25 were edited, condensed, and rearranged. And we know that this happened because when we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, we began finding some of the original documents. And when we found the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt, 1947, we began to find some of the original documents for the New Testament texts. And when they were compared against the version that we have today, what we could see is that our modern Bible is good. It's a good document. It simply is incomplete. And when we went back into those original documents, we were able to find the pieces that were left out and the pieces that were missing. And what's so interesting is those are the very pieces that tell us of the power of human emotion and belief in our hearts to change our world. And that's what was lost in the Judeo-Christian tradition on the one hand, and on the other hand, it was never lost in the ancient Tibetan Buddhist traditions. It was never lost in the Aboriginal traditions or in the Native American traditions of North America or in the Hindu traditions of the Vedas that go back over 8,000 years. Mm-hmm. Those other traditions didn't undergo the editing process that our Judeo-Christian texts have undergone. So, and I'm not saying that one is right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm saying that there's information that all of those traditions contain. And when we marry them all together with the best science of our time, it empowers us to participate, to be part of what happens in our world, rather than feeling powerless as if things happen for no reason and we can't do anything about them. Mm. So the language that we're talking about that's described in these texts is the language, it's called the language of the heart. Mm. It is the power of us humans to feel in our hearts, to feel and give gratitude and appreciation and thanks as if the outcome of our prayer has already happened. Hmm. And again, I know this is a very different way for many people to think about the way our world works. For other people, it's very much aligned with what they've always believed. But what the experiments are showing is that when we can create the feeling in our heart as if something has already happened, it sets into motion physical principles that will allow that feeling and that outcome to actually occur in our lives. So when we feel in our hearts that the healing in our bodies, for example, has already happened, what that feeling does is it sends a signal to our brain, and our brain releases the chemistry in our bodies that allows that feeling, allows the healing to take place. So it's when we feel appreciation and gratitude for the health and vitality of our bodies that we send the signal to our brain, and the brain releases the hormone